I am Jasmine, 35 years old, and 2 weeks before Christmas. I stood in my parents' hallway, holding a $15,000 gift I was about to give them. Instead of welcoming me, I overheard them planning to lock me in their basement to babysit 5 screaming toddlers, so my little cooking hobby would not embarrass my sister in front of her wealthy in-laws. So I turned around, walked out the door, and changed my holiday plans. On December 22nd, when my mother called screaming about missing food and an unpaid venue deposit, I simply laughed from my first-class seat to St. Lucia and told her not to wait up for the catering. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach your toxic family a lesson in respect. Growing up in Atlanta, success in my family was strictly defined by boardrooms and corner offices. My parents, Beatrice and Calvin, measured worth in corporate titles and strategic marriages. My younger sister Chloe played her game perfectly. At 28, she secured her position as the family favorite by marrying Liam, a wealthy white venture capitalist whose family practically oozed old money and exclusivity. I chose a different path. I fell in love with culinary arts, working grueling hours in high-pressure kitchens until I built my own elite catering firm. To the rest of Atlanta, I was a highly sought-after executive chef, fully booked 18 months in advance. To my family, I was just the girl who worked in a kitchen, a blue-collar disappointment who smelled like garlic and onions instead of expensive perfume. It was the second week of December when I drove up to my parents' sprawling suburban estate in Alpharetta. The crisp winter air felt refreshing, and for once I was actually looking forward to seeing them. In my hands, I held a custom embossed leather binder containing a spectacular holiday menu. I had planned to gift them a premium catering package for their upcoming pre-Christmas gala. Wagyu beef sliders, lobster blinis, imported caviar, and a full staff of professional servers. It was a $15,000 gesture meant to finally prove my success and bring us together. The front door was slightly ajar, likely left open by my father, who always forgot to pull it completely shut after grabbing the morning packages. I stepped into the grand marble foyer, wiping my boots on the mat, preparing to call out a cheerful greeting. But the sound of laughter drifting from the formal living room stopped me in my tracks. "Are you absolutely sure his parents are coming this time?" That was my father Calvin, his voice thick with anxious anticipation. "We cannot have a repeat of last Thanksgiving when they canceled at the last minute." "They are definitely coming," Chloe replied, her tone dripping with self-importance. "Liam booked their first-class tickets himself. His mother is already demanding to know the vintage of the champagne we are serving. We have to make this gala absolutely flawless, Mom. The venue has to be perfect, the food has to be Michelin quality, and there cannot be any distractions. None." My mother, Beatrice, chimed in, her voice soothing and confident. "Do not worry about a thing, sweetheart. I have been coordinating everything for the Buckhead rental property. It will look like we have owned the place for decades. Liam's family will be thoroughly impressed by our taste." I stood frozen in the hallway, my fingers gripping the leather binder tightly. They had been boasting about this luxury rental for weeks, pretending it was a favor from a mysterious wealthy friend. I pushed down the urge to announce my presence, something telling me to stay perfectly still and listen. "But what about the kids?" Chloe whined, the anxiety creeping back into her voice. "Liam's sister is bringing her 3 terrors, and I have my 2. 5 toddlers running around a luxury mansion while we are trying to host a sophisticated cocktail hour is a recipe for disaster. We need to hire a professional nanny service or maybe a team of them." "A nanny service this close to Christmas will cost a fortune," Calvin grumbled. "We are already stretching the budget to the absolute limit just to afford the decorations and the premium liquor your mother insisted on buying." "We do not need to hire anyone," Beatrice said dismissively. A light dismissive chuckle followed her words. "We have Jasmine." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Jasmine?" Chloe scoffed. "Mom, she is supposed to be doing the food. You said you bullied her into providing the catering for free. How is she going to cook and babysit? She can do both," Beatrice stated casually, as if she were discussing the logistics of a rented mule rather than her eldest daughter. "We are going to set up a play area in the finished basement. We will just put Jasmine down there with the toddlers. She can keep them quiet, feed them whatever little snacks she brings, and keep them completely out of the way." But what if she wants to come upstairs and mingle? Chloe pressed her voice laced with genuine horror. Mom, Liam's parents are so particular. I cannot have Jasmine walking around in her messy chef clothes trying to make small talk with venture capitalists. She does not know how to act in those circles. Her little kitchen hobby is cute and all, but it is not exactly country club conversation. She will embarrass me. She will not embarrass anyone because she will not be seen, Calvin added firmly. Your mother is right. Jasmine is used to working in the background. It is what she does. We will just tell her the kids need constant supervision and that her primary job for the night is keeping them entertained downstairs. If she needs to bring food up, she can use the service stairs, drop the trays, and go right back down. Exactly, Beatrice agreed. It solves two problems at once. We get the free food she is always bragging about, and we get free childcare. Plus, keeping her in the basement means we do not have to explain why our eldest daughter is still unmarried and working a blue-collar service job. We will just tell Liam's parents she could not make it due to a last-minute shift at the restaurant. It is cleaner that way. Chloe let out a bright, cruel laugh that echoed off the marble walls of the foyer. It is actually perfect. She can wear one of those plain black aprons, so if Liam's mother accidentally sees her in the hallway, she will just assume she is the hired help. Which, let us be honest, is basically what she is anyway. I stood there, the leather binder, feeling suddenly heavy and ridiculous in my hands. The air in my lungs felt incredibly thin. 35 years of my life flashed before my eyes. The straight A's I had earned that they ignored because I refused to go to law school. The grueling 18-hour shifts I worked to build my business from the ground up while they funded Chloe's luxury lifestyle. The countless times I had bitten my tongue when they made passive-aggressive comments about my weight, my single status, and my career choices. I had come here today to offer them a $15,000 gift out of love. I had wanted to elevate their party to make them proud to finally earn my seat at their table. But they did not want me at their table. They wanted me locked in the basement, hidden away like a dirty secret, wearing a plain black apron, so their wealthy white in-laws would mistake me for a servant. A younger version of myself might have burst into that living room with tears streaming down my face. I might have yelled, demanded an apology, and begged them to see my worth. I might have thrown the custom menu on the coffee table and stormed out in a fit of dramatic rage. But I was not that scared, desperate girl anymore. I was an executive chef who commanded a kitchen of 20 highly trained professionals. I managed million-dollar budgets and dealt with the most demanding clients in the city without breaking a sweat. I knew the value of my time, my skill, and my presence. And I finally realized that my family could not afford me. I did not make a single sound. I did not drop my keys or gasp or let out a dramatic sigh. I simply tightened my grip on the leather binder, turned around, and walked silently out the front door, pulling it gently shut behind me. The walk down the paved driveway to my car felt like crossing a bridge from one life into another. The crisp winter air no longer felt refreshing, it felt clarifying. I unlocked my luxury SUV, a vehicle that cost more than my father's entire yearly salary, and slid into the driver's seat. I placed the binder on the passenger seat and started the engine. Just as I was pulling out of their neighborhood, my phone vibrated in the cup holder. I glanced at the screen at a red stoplight. It was a text message from my mother. Jasmine, honey, do not forget you promised to drop off the menu for the free food you are bringing for the gala. Chloe needs to approve the appetizers by tonight to make sure they fit the aesthetic. Let me know when you are coming by. I stared at the message, reading the sheer entitlement dripping from every word. They really believed I was just a desperate, obedient servant waiting for their approval. They believed they could lock me in a basement while feasting on my hard work. They believed they held all the power. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I did not type out my hurt. I did not unleash my anger. I simply smiled, a cold, sharp smile that reached all the way to my eyes, and typed a 3-word reply. It is handled. I hit send, tossed the phone back into the cup holder, and pressed my foot down on the gas pedal. They wanted the help to stay invisible. They were about to get exactly what they asked for. The tires of my luxury SUV gripped the familiar asphalt of the highway as I drove away from the sprawling estates of Alpharetta and headed back toward the beating heart of downtown Atlanta. The heater blew warm air against my face, but a deep, icy calm had already settled into my bones. For years, I had bent over backward trying to fit into the impossibly narrow box my parents had constructed for me. My mother and father measured a person's worth by country club memberships, exclusive zip codes, and strategic marriages. When my younger sister Chloe brought Liam home, she essentially secured her spot as the undisputed golden child. Liam was a venture capitalist whose family had been generating massive wealth since the 1920s. He was white, incredibly rich, and carried an air of oblivious old money privilege that my parents practically worshipped. They treated him like royalty, reshaping their entire lives to match his family's expectations. Chloe became the perfect suburban wife, hosting lavish brunches and attending high society charity galas entirely funded by my parents, draining their own bank accounts to keep up the grand charade. And me, I was just the girl who cooked. They never cared that the girl who cooked had actually built a multi-million-dollar culinary empire with her bare hands. They deliberately ignored the fact that my catering company was the most exclusive in the city, fully booked 18 months in advance by the exact same high society elite. They spent all their time desperately trying to impress. To them, food service was a blue-collar embarrassment. Whenever a prestigious culinary magazine featured my business on their cover, my mother would quickly change the subject to Chloe's new private tennis instructor. I had spent a decade swallowing that blatant disrespect, telling myself they just did not understand the industry. I justified their behavior, thinking that if I just worked a little harder, cooked a little better, and provided them with enough free luxury services, they would finally look at me with the same glowing pride they reserved for Chloe. But overhearing them plot to lock me in a basement with 5 screaming toddlers so my presence would not ruin their aesthetic was the final clarifying blow. They understood my success perfectly well. They just hated that it did not serve their narrative of superiority. I pulled into the private underground parking garage of my corporate headquarters in Midtown Atlanta. The sleek glass and steel building housed my primary prep kitchens, my tasting rooms, and my executive offices. Stepping out of the car, the faint, intoxicating scent of roasted garlic rich, demi-glace, and expensive truffles hit the air. It was the smell of my independence. I pushed through the heavy double doors and walked into the sprawling, immaculate stainless steel domain where I was the absolute authority. The ambient noise of 20 highly trained culinary professionals, shouting calls, searing meats, and moving with synchronized precision washed over me like a comforting blanket. The fluorescent lights gleamed off the pristine countertops. This was my sanctuary. Out in the suburbs, I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. In here, I was a visionary. I was respected. I was a boss. My lead sous chef, Terrence, spotted me immediately from across the room. He wiped his hands on a pristine white towel and walked over his eyes, dropping to the custom leather binder still clutched tightly in my hand. He knew exactly what it was. We had spent the last 3 weeks meticulously designing the menu for my family's Christmas Eve gala. We had sourced the absolute rarest ingredients from around the globe, planned a flawless execution strategy, and scheduled our top-tier service staff to work the event on holiday pay. Terrence knew how much I wanted to impress them. He had seen the toll their constant dismissal took on me over the years, watching me bend over backward to accommodate my mother's impossible last-minute demands for previous family gatherings. "You are back early, chef," he said, his brow furrowing slightly as he studied my face. "I thought you were going to stay for dinner and walk them through the tasting menu. Are we still on track for the Buckhead Estate load-in on the 22nd? The logistics team needs to confirm the truck routes." I looked around my kitchen. I looked at the brilliant, dedicated team I had assembled. I saw the line cooks prepping delicate pastries and the pastry chef tempering chocolate with absolute focus. They deserved to work for clients who respected their craft and treated them with basic human dignity, not for people who viewed them as invisible help to be shoved into a corner and disrespected. I looked back at Terrence and handed him the heavy leather binder. He took it cautiously, opening the cover to look at the elaborate $15,000 contract I had signed and paid for out of my own pocket as a gift to the very people who wanted to treat me like a servant. "Shred it," I said. My voice was completely steady, devoid of the anxiety that usually plagued me when dealing with my family. Terrence blinked, looking from the elaborate menu back to me in sheer confusion. "Shred it." But chef, the imported Wagyu beef just arrived this morning. The prep team has already started the bases for the lobster blinis. We have thousands of dollars of product allocated for this specific event. I said, shred it, Terrence. We are no longer servicing the Addams Family Christmas Gala. In fact, we are never servicing them again. Find another use for the Wagyu. Run it as a special for our corporate clients this week. Just get their names off my board. Terrence did not ask any probing questions. He had been with me for 5 years and had catered for my mother twice before. He knew exactly how toxic, demanding, and utterly ungrateful she could be. A slow smile of profound understanding spread across his face. Considered it done, chef, he said, closing the binder with a satisfying sharp snap. I will redirect the prep team immediately and clear the schedule. I left the bustling, rhythmic energy of the kitchen and walked down the quiet, thickly carpeted hallway to my private executive office. I locked the heavy oak door behind me and dropped my purse onto the leather sofa. The lingering adrenaline from the morning's awful discovery was beginning to fade, replaced by a sharp, cold, calculating focus. They wanted to use me as free childcare while they paraded around a luxury mansion pretending to be Atlanta royalty in front of Liam's old money parents. But they had conveniently forgotten one massive critical detail about that gorgeous mansion. I sat down at my wide mahogany desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dim office. I pulled up my secure email server and searched for the specific property management company that handled the exclusive Buckhead estate my mother had been bragging about to anyone who would listen. 2 months ago, my parents had come to my apartment in an absolute panic. The rental property required a massive financial guarantor to secure the highly coveted holiday dates. Because my parents had been secretly draining their retirement funds and maxing out their credit cards to fund Chloe's lavish lifestyle and keep up appearances for Liam's family, their credit scores had taken a massive hit. The property management company had denied their application. They had begged me to co-sign the lease, crying about how important this party was for Chloe's marriage and how Liam's parents would judge them if they hosted it at their regular suburban home. They promised they would cover the daily rental expenses if I just provided the financial backing to get the approval. Like a desperate, eager daughter wanting to prove her loyalty and please her parents, I had signed the extensive paperwork. Furthermore, I had kept it a total secret from Chloe and Liam, just as my parents had tearfully demanded so their pride would not be damaged. I opened the digital lease agreement on my screen. There, in bold black and white, was my signature, serving as the sole financial anchor, keeping their entire grand holiday illusion afloat. The property manager had clearly stated in the contract that if the primary guarantor withdrew before the actual move-in date, the massive $10,000 security deposit would instantly be charged to the secondary cards on file to hold the reservation. My parents' secondary cards, which I knew for an absolute fact would decline immediately due to their hidden debts. I rested my hand on the computer mouse. I stared at the screen, reading the cancellation clause word for word. I thought about the conversation I had just overheard. I thought about the plain black apron they wanted me to wear, so I would blend in with the hired help. I thought about the basement they planned to banish me to, away from the laughter and the champagne and the celebration. They thought I was just the help. They thought I was powerless and desperate for their scraps of affection. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling a powerful electric sense of liberation wash over my entire body. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was the one holding all the cards. I hovered my finger directly over the cancel button, ready to watch their perfect illusion burn to the ground. I pulled my hand away from the computer mouse. Pressing the cancel button right then would have been too easy. It would have given them time to scramble, time to secure a backup venue, time to spin a story where I was the erratic villain who ruined Christmas on a whim. A true chef knows that timing is absolutely everything. You have to let the heat build. You have to let the ingredients reduce until the flavor is undeniable. I closed the laptop and decided to let them dig their hole a little deeper. Over the next 72 hours, my phone became a relentless beacon of their sheer audacity. It started on Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a vendor meeting negotiating a contract for locally sourced truffles when my screen lit up with a massive block of text from Chloe. It was not a greeting. It was a minute-by-minute itinerary for my basement imprisonment. She had color-coded it, The spreadsheet detailed exact times for toddler naps, specific windows for organic snack distribution, and strict limits on screen time. She specifically noted that I was to arrive through the garage and remain on the lower level at all times. But the absolute highlight of her message, the part that actually made me chuckle in the middle of my boardroom, was her wardrobe mandate. Jasmine, she wrote, please make sure you wear a plain black apron over simple dark clothes. Liam's parents are very traditional, and we absolutely do not want them confusing you for a real guest if you accidentally cross paths in the hallway. Just keep a low profile. Thanks. I stared at the words. She wanted me to look like the hired help, so her white old money-in-laws would not realize the woman changing dirty diapers downstairs was actually her sister. The sheer level of self-hatred and social climbing required to type those words was staggering. 10 years ago, a message like that would have sent me into a spiral of depression. I would have called my friends crying, questioning my worth, wondering why my own sister was so deeply ashamed of my existence. Now sitting in an office I owned, wearing a tailored suit that cost more than her monthly mortgage payment, I felt nothing but a cold, clinical pity. I did not argue. I did not try to defend my dignity. I simply typed back a cheerful thumbs-up emoji and added sounds perfect. See you soon. I was feeding their delusion, fattening them up for the slaughter. My compliance only emboldened them further. On Wednesday afternoon, my mother called. I was standing in the testing kitchen evaluating a new winter menu for a corporate client when Beatrice's frantic, pretentious voice filled my ear. Jasmine listened to me very carefully. She began bypassing any form of hello. Liam's mother just sent over her dietary requirements for the Christmas Eve gala. She is incredibly particular. She only eats a specific diet and we cannot afford a single mistake. She expects premium appetizers when they walk through the door. I signaled for my sous chef Terrence to turn down the heat on the stove, pressing the phone closer to my ear. What exactly does she need, Mom? She wants caviar, Beatrice stated, her voice tight with panic. But not just any caviar. It has to be imported royal beluga. Liam mentioned she had it at a gala in Paris last month and has been craving it since. You need to source it immediately and bring it on the morning of the 22nd. I leaned against the stainless steel counter. Mom, do you have any idea how hard it is to source authentic royal beluga 3 days before Christmas? Not to mention, a tin large enough for a party will cost roughly $4,000. I need to invoice you for that kind of specialty item. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. The very mention of money was always a trigger for Beatrice. Invoice me. Jasmine, do not be difficult. You know your father and I are stretched thin paying for the floral arrangements and the string quartet. This is your contribution to Chloe's happiness. You are supposed to be providing the food for free. Surely you have connections in your little industry to get a discount. Just put it on your company card. It is a business expense for you anyway. She was demanding I spend $4,000 of my own hard-earned money to feed a woman who would not even be told my name. She wanted me to subsidize her grand illusion of wealth while I sat in a basement wiping spit up off my plain black apron. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the incredible disrespect wash over me. I looked around my kitchen at the gleaming equipment, the dedicated staff, the sheer reality of my success that she continually chose to ignore. You know what, Mom, I said, making my voice sound bright and compliant. You are absolutely right. It is my contribution to the family. I will make a few calls to my suppliers right now. Consider the caviar handled. It will be top tier. Oh, thank goodness. Beatrice sighed, the tension leaving her voice instantly. I knew you would figure it out. Just make sure it is plated beautifully before you go down to the basement with the kids. We want it waiting in the grand foyer when they arrive. And Jasmine, please make sure your hair is tied back tightly. We cannot have any cross-contamination. I promised her everything would be flawless. I assured her the basement activities were prepped, the toddlers would be entertained, and the caviar would be spectacular. When I hung up the phone, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. The trap was set and they were sprinting right into it. I immediately called my most exclusive seafood purveyor. I did not ask for a discount. I ordered the absolute finest, highest grade imported royal beluga caviar he had in his vault. I paid full price, charging it directly to my personal black card. I paid for expedited overnight shipping, ensuring it would arrive at my corporate kitchen by Friday morning. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in holding my nerve. Chloe texted me 2 more times, once to remind me that the kids liked their sandwiches cut into stars, and another time to demand I bring extra toilet paper for the basement bathroom so I would not have to come upstairs to restock it. I answered every single message with cheerful enthusiasm. I was the perfect, obedient, invisible servant they so desperately wanted me to be. Friday morning arrived crisp and bright. I walked into my headquarters with a spring in my step. The energy in the kitchen was electric. We were gearing up for the massive celebrity charity event I had booked after canceling my family's gala. My staff was moving with beautiful synchronized precision. At exactly 10 in the morning, a courier arrived at the delivery bay. He handed over a small, heavily insulated silver package. I signed the electronic manifest and took the box directly to my main prep station. Terrence walked over, wiping his hands on a clean towel, his eyes tracking the silver package. "Is that what I think it is, chef?" he asked, his eyebrows raising. I popped the seal on the insulation and pulled out the sleek black tin. The label gleamed under the kitchen lights. Genuine royal beluga. Over $4,000 of pure, unadulterated luxury resting in the palm of my hand. "It certainly is," I said. Terrence looked confused. "I thought we scrubbed the Addams Family event from the board. Did the charity client request a last-minute caviar edition?" "No," I replied, picking up a specialized pearl spoon. "This was a special request from my mother. She demanded I buy it out of my own pocket to impress her son-in-law's mother. She told me to plate it beautifully before I locked myself in the basement." Terrence let out a low whistle, shaking his head. The staff knew about my family's demands. They had seen the stress it caused me over the years. "Are you going to send it to them anyway?" he asked. I looked at the tin, then looked at Terrence. "Grab 2 loaves of the fresh brioche we baked this morning," I instructed. "Slice them thick and toast them in clarified butter. Get the creme fraiche and the chives." Terrence grinned, a knowing spark lighting up his eyes. "Yes, chef." 10 minutes later, I called the entire kitchen staff to a halt. 20 hardworking, brilliant culinary artists stopped what they were doing and gathered around my central prep station. Spread out before them were trays of perfectly toasted buttery brioche points topped with delicate dollops of creme fraiche. I opened the tin of royal beluga. The dark, glossy pearls caught the light. Carefully, generously, I spooned the $4,000 caviar onto the toast points. I made sure every single member of my staff, from my lead sous chef down to the newest dishwasher, had a piece. "You all have worked incredibly hard this season," I announced, raising my own piece of toast. "You are respected, you are valued, and you are the only people I want to share this with." The kitchen erupted in cheers. We stood around the stainless steel island, eating the world's most expensive luxury ingredient, laughing and celebrating our hard work. It tasted like absolute victory. It tasted like freedom. I savored every single bite, knowing full well that there was not a single pearl left for the grand foyer in Buckhead. I threw the empty tin into the recycling bin, dusted off my hands, and walked back to my office. The caviar was gone. The menu was shredded. My staff was reassigned. Now it was time to pull the final pin on the grenade. The drive from the bistro back to my culinary headquarters felt lighter than any journey I had taken in years. The heavy, suffocating weight of my family's expectations had completely evaporated, leaving behind a sharp, exhilarating sense of purpose. I had spent my entire adult life trying to serve them a feast of my accomplishments, hoping they would finally pull out a chair for me. Now I was clearing the table entirely. I arrived at my corporate kitchen just as the afternoon prep shift was shifting into high gear. The symphony of clattering pans, sizzling proteins, and shouted orders greeted me at the door. I walked past the bustling line cooks and headed straight for the central logistics office, a glass-walled room that overlooked the entire operation. My director of events, a sharp, incredibly efficient woman named Marcus, looked up from her dual monitors as I walked in. Marcus knew the intricate details of every single client, every menu variation, and every staff schedule we managed. She also knew exactly how deeply my family's events usually disrupted our workflow. Chef Marcus said, adjusting her glasses. "I was just about to come find you. We have a situation with the schedule for the 24th. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Let me guess. We have a massive gap in our calendar because I told Terrence to shred the Addams Family menu. Marcus smiled, a mixture of relief and professional curiosity. Word travels fast in the kitchen. The prep team is thrilled. They do not have to work your mother's event, and with our Christmas Eve booking recently canceled, it leaves our elite fleet available on the 24th. We have 20 of our top-tier servers, bartenders, and culinary staff fully scheduled with nothing to do. I was going to ask if you wanted me to send them home with holiday pay or try to find a last-minute booking. Before I could answer, the heavy red telephone on Marcus's desk rang. It was the private line, the one reserved exclusively for our ultra-high net worth clients, celebrities, politicians, and industry titans who required absolute discretion and immediate service. Marcus raised an eyebrow at me and picked up the receiver. Jasmine Culinary Group, Marcus speaking. How may I help you? I watched as Marcus's posture straightened, her eyes widening slightly as she grabbed a pen and began furiously scribbling on a notepad. She covered the mouthpiece with her hand and looked up at me, her expression a mix of shock and pure adrenaline. Chef, she whispered urgently. It is the team for Jonathan Hayes. I felt a spark of genuine excitement. Jonathan Hayes was one of the most prominent philanthropists and actors in Atlanta, known for hosting incredibly lavish, highly publicized charity events. We had been trying to get on his preferred vendor list for 2 years. What does he want? I mouthed back. Marcus uncovered the phone and listened for another moment before speaking. Yes, I understand completely. A last-minute cancellation by your current caterer is a nightmare for a Christmas Eve charity gala. Let me put you on a brief hold while I consult directly with our executive chef. She pressed the mute button and looked at me, her eyes shining with the thrill of the impossible catch. Their caterer just went bankrupt and pulled out. He is hosting a massive charity gala on Christmas Eve for 300 VIP guests. He needs a full premium menu, an entire staff, and a fleet of trucks, and he is willing to pay triple our usual emergency rate to secure us. He is begging Jasmine. The universe had just handed me the absolute perfect opportunity to replace my family's toxic delusion with a legendary, lucrative reality. I did not even have to think about it. Tell him we will take it, I said, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. Tell him we have an elite 20-person staff, ready to go, a fleet of refrigerated trucks fueled up, and I will personally design and execute a Michelin-quality menu that will blow his guests away. Tell him Jasmine Culinary Group is stepping in to save his Christmas. Marcus beamed, taking the phone off mute and expertly sealing the deal. Within 5 minutes, we had secured a contract that would generate a massive profit and solidify our reputation in the highest echelons of Atlanta society. I walked out of the logistics office and stood at the head of the main kitchen. I grabbed a metal spoon and clinked it sharply against a stainless steel mixing bowl. The loud, clear sound cut through the ambient noise, and every single person in the room stopped what they were doing and turned to look at me. Listen up, everyone, I called out, my voice carrying effortlessly across the gleaming room. There has been a major change of plans for the holiday schedule. The Addams Family Gala has been completely scrubbed from our books. We are no longer servicing that event. A collective audible sigh of relief washed over the staff. Several of the senior servers who had endured my mother's condescending demands and my sister's rude snapping fingers at previous events exchanged triumphant smiles. Instead, I continued, my energy rising. We have just secured the Jonathan Hayes Christmas Eve Charity Gala. 300 VIP guests, a full premium menu. We are deploying the entire elite fleet. This is our chance to show the absolute pinnacle of Atlanta society what this kitchen is capable of. I need all hands on deck focus, dialed in, and absolute perfection. We are going to execute a flawless event, and everyone working the holiday shift is getting a double bonus. The kitchen absolutely erupted. My staff cheered, banging spoons against pots, the sheer excitement and relief creating a wave of powerful positive energy. This was what leadership looked like. This was what respect felt like. I was not a basement babysitter. I was the general of a culinary army, and we were about to march into a massive victory. I spent the next several hours completely immersed in the creative process. I stood at the massive whiteboards in the strategy room, systematically erasing every single detail of the Addams Family Christmas. I wiped away the notes about Liam's mother's dietary restrictions. I wiped away the timeline for the garage load-in. I wiped away every trace of the illusion I had been planning to bankroll. In its place, I sketched out a breathtaking, innovative menu for the charity gala. Pan-seared scallops with a citrus beurre blanc, herb-crusted lamb rack, delicate winter vegetable tarts, and a dessert display that would look like modern art. I reassigned the entire 20-person staff, pairing our best sommeliers with our sharpest servers. I routed the fleet of pristine logo-wrapped catering trucks to the downtown ballroom where the charity event would be held. Every single resource, every ounce of premium ingredients, every drop of my professional energy was officially redirected away from the people who viewed me as hired help and toward a client who respected my craft and was willing to pay a premium for it. As I was finalizing the prep schedule with Terrence, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a picture message from my mother, Beatrice. I opened the text. It was a photograph taken inside a discount dollar store. The image showed a plastic shopping cart filled with cheap, brightly colored coloring books, flimsy plastic building blocks, and a few packs of off-brand crayons. Below the picture was a message dripping with her usual demanding entitlement. "Jasmine, I just picked up these little toys for you to use with the kids in the basement. I do not want them getting bored and running upstairs to bother the adults. Make sure you keep them engaged with these. Also bring some extra garbage bags for the diaper pail down there. We want the house smelling perfect when Liam's parents arrive. Do not forget to wear the black apron." I stared at the photograph of the cheap toys. I looked at the words she had typed ordering me to manage a diaper pail while she played society hostess on my dime. There was no longer any sting. There was no residual hurt. There was only the absolute, undeniable confirmation that I was making the exact right decision. They were perfectly content to shove me in a dark room with a pile of dollar store crayons while they lived a fantasy they could not afford. I looked up at my logistics board, completely filled with the details of a massive, incredibly lucrative celebrity gala that I was going to conquer. I looked back down at the text message, demanding I bring garbage bags to my own family's party. I did not try to explain myself. I did not send a paragraph defending my worth. I simply tapped the screen and replied with a single cheerful thumbs-up emoji. The collision course was officially locked in. They were blindly speeding toward a brick wall of reality, and I was going to make sure I had a front row seat to watch the impact. But I was not going to watch it from a basement in Atlanta. I was going to watch it from a very different, much warmer vantage point. The weekend before Christmas arrived with a biting chill in the air, but the atmosphere inside the trendy Buckhead Bistro was suffocatingly warm and thick with the scent of overpriced truffle oil and roasted espresso. My mother had insisted on this mandatory pre-holiday brunch to go over the final logistics for their grand illusion. I parked my car a few blocks away, taking a moment to center myself before walking into a restaurant that catered exclusively to people who wanted to be seen rather than people who actually appreciated good food. I spotted my family immediately. They were seated at a prime corner booth, bathed in the natural light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Liam, Chloe's wealthy white venture capitalist husband, was holding court. Chloe sat beside him, hanging on his every word with practiced adoration, while my parents leaned forward across the table, their faces arranged in masks of eager submission. I slid into the empty seat across from them. A waitress in a crisp white apron immediately appeared and poured me a mimosa. The clinking of crystal glasses and the low hum of jazz music masked the deep pulsing tension radiating from our booth. Liam turned his attention to me, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored blazer. He looked at me with an expression of benevolent pity, the kind of look a wealthy man reserves for a charity case he feels obligated to acknowledge. "Jasmine," Liam began, his voice loud enough to ensure the neighboring tables could hear his generosity. "Chloe and I were talking about your situation the other night. I know the food service industry is a tough grind, especially for people stuck at the bottom, trying to make ends meet. It is a hard life, constantly hustling for those little catering gigs." I took a slow sip of my mimosa, letting the citrus and champagne wash over my tongue. I did not say a word. I just waited for the punchline. "I actually have a buddy who owns a regional chain of fast casual chicken franchises." Liam continued, leaning back comfortably against the leather booth. They are expanding across the state. I could make a call, pull a few strings, and get you an interview for a shift manager position. It would be a huge step up for you. You would finally have a steady paycheck, some real health benefits, and a chance to actually move up in the food industry. You cannot rely on those small kitchen jobs forever. Chloe let out a soft, breathy laugh. She reached for her own glass, making sure to lift her arm just enough so the ambient light would catch the heavy diamond tennis bracelet resting on her wrist. It was a bracelet my parents had almost certainly financed on a high-interest credit card to ensure she looked the part of a wealthy socialite. You really should take the offer, Jasmine, Chloe said, her lips curving into a mocking smirk. Liam is being incredibly generous. It is time you started thinking about your future. You cannot just cook for fun for the rest of your life. My father Calvin leaned sharply across the table, pointing his silver fork directly at me. His eyes were hard and commanding. You need to be grateful for Liam's charity, Jasmine. He is sticking his neck out to help you find a real job. You should appreciate the handout and thank him for looking out for you. My mother Beatrice nodded enthusiastically in agreement. Exactly. It would be so nice to finally tell our friends that you have a stable, respectable management position instead of just hovering in the background of other people's parties. I sat completely still, absorbing the sheer, unadulterated disrespect echoing across the brunch table. I did not defend my business. I did not pull out my phone to show them the massive portfolio of celebrity clients I catered for weekly. I did not tell Liam that my elite culinary empire generated more daily revenue than his friend's entire fast food chicken franchise produced in a month. I simply smiled, maintaining a polite, impenetrable expression, and looked down at my left hand resting on the white linen tablecloth. Wrapped around my wrist was a custom-imported vintage timepiece. I had purchased it for myself in Geneva after closing a massive corporate contract the previous spring. I knew for an absolute fact that the watch on my wrist cost significantly more than the luxury imported sedan Liam had just handed off to the valet outside. I possessed more wealth in that single piece of jewelry than Liam had in his entire checking account, but I let them enjoy their false sense of superiority. I let them feast on their delusions. That is very thoughtful of you, Liam, I said, my voice smooth and perfectly pleasant. I will definitely keep your friend's chicken franchise in mind as I map out my career goals for the new year. Liam beamed, clearly satisfied with his performance as the benevolent savior, and the conversation seamlessly shifted away from my supposed miserable life and moved directly onto their absolute favorite topic, the Buckhead Mansion. Beatrice practically vibrated with excitement as she described the sweeping dual staircases in the foyer of the rental property. She talked animatedly about how Liam's parents were going to be completely breathless when they walked through the solid oak front doors on Christmas Eve. She boasted about the grand formal dining room and how the massive crystal chandeliers would perfectly illuminate the evening. Calvin chimed in, bragging to Liam about how he had aggressively negotiated the lease for the holiday weekend. He puffed out his chest, claiming he had leveraged his vast corporate contacts to secure the highly coveted property ahead of a dozen other wealthy bidders. He completely glossed over the reality of the situation. He conveniently omitted the fact that the luxury property management company had rejected his application outright due to his abysmal credit score. He left out the part where he and Beatrice had begged me to provide my pristine financial backing to secure the rental. They were selling Liam a magnificent, flawless fantasy, and it was entirely funded by my silent signature. I listened to Chloe detail the exact moment Liam's mother would walk into the house. Chloe said she could not wait to see the look of pure, unadulterated respect on her mother-in-law's face. They were so deeply intoxicated by their own elaborate lies that they had completely forgotten who was actually holding the keys to their kingdom. They honestly believed they had outsmarted the system, using me to guarantee their wealth while planning to lock me in the basement the moment the guests arrived. The brunch dragged on for another hour. I finished my eggs Benedict, noting internally that the hollandaise sauce was terribly underseasoned and the eggs were slightly overcooked. I politely dabbed my mouth with my linen napkin and placed it gently on the table. "Excuse me for a moment," I said to the table, standing up from the booth. "I need to use the restroom before we leave." They barely acknowledged my departure already, deep into an argument about which classical music playlist to feature during the cocktail hour. I walked away from the sounds of their clinking glasses and arrogant laughter moving toward the back of the restaurant. The bathroom was lined with dark slate marble and smelled heavily of expensive citrus soap and eucalyptus. It was completely empty and blissfully quiet. I walked over to the sleek vanity, turned on the polished chrome faucet, and washed my hands in the warm water. I looked up at my reflection in the wide illuminated mirror. I did not look like a struggling shift manager. I did not look like an unpaid basement babysitter. I looked calm. I looked powerful. I looked absolutely ready. I dried my hands, reached into my designer purse, and pulled out my phone. I opened the secure application for the luxury property management company that handled the Buckhead estate. The dashboard loaded instantly, displaying the address of the mansion and the active dates for the upcoming Christmas Eve gala. Right below the property details shining brightly on the high-definition screen was my name listed as the sole primary financial guarantor. I tapped on the account settings and navigated to the lease agreement profile. A red button sat at the bottom of the screen. I pressed it, initiating the withdrawal process. The screen immediately prompted me with a final bold warning. It stated that removing myself as the primary guarantor would instantly shift all financial liabilities, including the massive $10,000 security deposit hold, directly to the secondary payment methods on file. The system explicitly warned that if the secondary cards declined the authorization, the reservation would be permanently revoked and all access codes would be deactivated. I stood in the quiet marble bathroom and thought about Calvin telling me to be grateful for a fast food job. I thought about Chloe's mocking smirk and the heavy diamond bracelet paid for with debt. I thought about my mother demanding I wear a plain black apron and hide in a basement with dirty diapers so her in-laws would not know I existed. I thought about the sheer blinding entitlement of people who demanded a feast while refusing to offer a crumb of respect. I did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. I pressed the button to officially execute the cancellation of my financial guarantee. The screen buffered for a fleeting moment before a bright green checkmark appeared. The system confirmed that I was officially removed from the lease. The financial burden had instantly, irrevocably been transferred to Beatrice and Calvin. I locked my phone and dropped it back into my purse. I knew exactly what the digital machinery was doing at that very second. The automated leasing system was currently attempting to authorize a $10,000 charge on my parents' maxed-out credit cards. It was going to fail miserably. The property manager was going to receive a notification of the declined payment and would give them a tiny, incredibly brief grace period to rectify the funds before locking them out of the house completely. They were going to hit critical financial failure in exactly 48 hours. They had built a beautiful, towering house of cards, and I had just quietly walked away with the foundation. I walked out of that slate marble bathroom, leaving behind the ghost of every time they had ever made me feel small. As I navigated through the crowded, trendy bistro, I did not even glance toward the corner booth where my family was still sitting. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were likely still drinking their mimosas, still laughing at Liam's condescending jokes, and still basking in the absolute certainty that they had outsmarted me. They were completely oblivious to the digital shockwave that was currently racing through the servers of the luxury property management company. Stepping out into the crisp Atlanta afternoon, I felt an extraordinary sense of clarity. For my entire life, my parents had meticulously constructed a towering facade of wealth and prestige. They had sacrificed their own financial stability to create an illusion of old money to ensure Chloe could secure a husband like Liam. They looked down on my culinary empire because it represented actual labor, while they worshipped the effortless inherited privilege that Liam brought to the table. But an illusion requires constant funding, and I had just ripped out the very foundation that was keeping their house of cards standing. I drove back to my corporate headquarters, sliding seamlessly back into the role of an executive chef, preparing for the most prestigious charity event of the season. The energy in my kitchen was intoxicating. My staff was operating at peak performance, meticulously prepping the intricate courses for the Jonathan Hayes Christmas Eve Gala. I tasted the citrus beurre blanc, adjusting the acidity with a squeeze of fresh Meyer lemon. I inspected the delicate winter vegetable tarts, ensuring the pastry was perfectly flaky. I was surrounded by excellence, by people who respected my vision and valued my leadership. I did not have time to dwell on the petty toxic dynamics of my family. I had a masterpiece to execute. It was not until late Thursday evening, long after the prep shifts had ended and the kitchen had been polished to a blinding shine, that the financial trap finally snapped shut. I was sitting alone in my private executive office. The building was quiet save for the low hum of the massive commercial refrigerators down the hall. I was reviewing the final logistics routes for our catering fleet when my cell phone vibrated violently against the mahogany desk. The screen illuminated the dark room, displaying an urgent, automated push notification from the Buckhead Property Management portal. I picked up the phone, my heart beating with a steady, rhythmic anticipation. I unlocked the screen and opened the secure application. The digital machinery had processed my withdrawal as the primary financial guarantor, exactly as the contract stipulated. The system, functioning with cold, emotionless efficiency, had immediately recognized that the massive $10,000 security deposit required to hold the luxury mansion was no longer secured. Following standard protocol, the automated billing system had instantly pivoted to the secondary payment methods on file. Those secondary methods belonged entirely to Beatrice and Calvin. I leaned back in my heavy leather chair and watched the notifications roll in, tracking the system as it attempted to extract the funds from my parents' accounts in real time. The first alert popped up on my screen. The system had attempted to charge $10,000 to my father's primary premium credit card. This was the same card Calvin notoriously flashed at expensive steakhouses to impress his business associates, always making sure the metallic sheen caught the light. I watched the screen refresh. A red status bar appeared next to the transaction ID. Declined. Insufficient funds. I let out a slow, quiet breath. I knew exactly why that card was maxed out. Calvin had used it to finance the extravagant country club membership he had purchased the moment Chloe announced her engagement to Liam. He needed to prove he belonged in the same social stratosphere as his future son-in-law. He had spent tens of thousands of dollars on initiation fees and mandatory monthly dining minimums, effectively draining his available credit just to buy proximity to wealthy people. The automated system, relentless in its programming, automatically moved to the next payment method on the list. It targeted my mother's preferred rewards card. This was the card Beatrice used to maintain her flawless suburban socialite aesthetic. The screen buffered for 3 seconds. Another red status bar flashed across the application. Declined. Credit limit exceeded. A dark, knowing smile spread across my face. I knew exactly where that credit limit had gone. Beatrice had spent the last 2 years obsessively upgrading her wardrobe, her home decor, and her luxury vehicle lease to ensure she never looked out of place when Liam's parents came to town. She had funded Chloe's lavish bridal shower, paid for expensive cosmetic procedures, and bought designer handbags on high-interest credit, all while sneering at my blue-collar catering business. She had built a fortress of designer debt, and now when she actually needed the capital to secure the most important venue of her social career, she had absolutely nothing left in the tank. The system made one final desperate attempt. It targeted a third backup card, a joint account my parents rarely used. I watched the spinning loading wheel, feeling the beautiful poetic justice of the moment. The entire future of their grand Christmas Eve illusion hung on this final digital transaction. They needed this mansion. They had already bragged about it to Liam's notoriously snobbish mother. They had told their entire country club circle they were hosting the holiday event of the season at an exclusive Buckhead estate. If they lost this house, they would be forced to host the billionaire-in-laws in their cramped, outdated suburban home. The spinning wheel stopped. The final red status bar slammed onto the screen. Declined. Transaction blocked by issuer. It was a total catastrophic financial failure. 3 cards. 3 brutal rejections. The system had officially determined that Beatrice and Calvin did not possess the capital required to secure the property. The grand illusion was officially bankrupt. I sat in the quiet glow of my office, letting the reality of their situation sink in. For my entire life, they had treated me like I was not good enough to sit at their table. They had mocked my passion, belittled my hard work, and planned to hide me in a basement because my presence did not fit their wealthy aesthetic. Yet the absolute irony was that my blue-collar kitchen money was the only real tangible wealth this family possessed. I was the only one who could actually afford the lifestyle they were desperately pretending to live. My phone vibrated again, breaking the silence of the room. This time, it was not an automated notification. It was a new voicemail from the senior property manager of the Buckhead estate. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear, listening to the crisp, professional voice echo in the quiet office. "Good evening, Jasmine," the property manager began, his tone polite, but laced with administrative urgency. "This is Marcus from Platinum Estate Rentals. We received your formal withdrawal as the primary guarantor for the holiday reservation on the Buckhead property. As per our policies, we attempted to transfer the $10,000 security deposit hold to the secondary cards provided by Calvin and Beatrice Adams. Unfortunately, all secondary payment methods have been declined by their respective banking institutions." I closed my eyes, savoring the absolute finality of his words. "I am leaving this message as a courtesy to you, since you originally established the account," the manager continued. "Please be advised that we cannot hold a luxury property over the peak holiday weekend without a secured deposit. If Calvin and Beatrice do not provide a valid authorized payment method by 9 in the morning on December 22nd, the lease will be formally and permanently revoked. All gate access codes will be deactivated, and the property will be immediately released back to the open market. Thank you." The message ended, leaving a heavy, satisfying silence in its wake. December 22nd. That was tomorrow morning. My parents had exactly 12 hours before the property management company locked them out of their own fantasy. A weaker person might have felt a twinge of guilt. A traditional obedient daughter might have called her parents, warned them about the declined cards, and offered to pay the deposit just to keep the peace and save the family from public humiliation. I had played that role for a decade. I had been the peacekeeper, the silent ATM, the reliable doormat. But I remembered Chloe's color-coded spreadsheet. I remembered the exact wording of her text message demanding I wear a plain black apron so I would not be confused for a real guest. I remembered my mother planning to trap me with dirty diapers while she drank my champagne. I deleted the voicemail. I did not forward it to Calvin. I did not text Beatrice to warn her. I permanently erased the message from my phone, ensuring that the very first time they realized their credit cards had failed would be when they showed up at the gates of the mansion and found themselves completely locked out. I placed my phone face down on the mahogany desk. I opened my laptop again and navigated away from the property management portal. I opened a new tab and typed in the web address for my preferred luxury travel concierge. The screen filled with images of pristine white sand beaches, swaying palm trees, and crystal-clear turquoise waters. The temperature in Atlanta was projected to drop below freezing over the holiday weekend, promising a bitter, miserable cold that perfectly matched the impending mood of my family. I had absolutely no intention of sticking around to deal with the fallout. My elite staff was fully prepped for the charity gala, and my sous chef Terrence was more than capable of executing my menu flawlessly. I had engineered a masterpiece, and now I deserved a reward. I selected a 5-star, ultra-exclusive resort nestled in the lush volcanic mountains of St. Lucia. The property featured private plunge pools, 24-hour butler service, and a complete ban on children. It was the exact opposite of a dark, noisy basement in Atlanta. I selected a premium oceanfront villa for the dates of December 22nd through December 26th. The total cost of the luxury Caribbean getaway was nearly double the security deposit my parents could not afford to pay. I pulled out my sleek metal black card, the exact same card I had used to purchase the imported caviar that my staff had devoured for breakfast. I entered the numbers into the travel portal with smooth, practiced keystrokes. I clicked confirm. The booking was processed instantly. No spinning wheels, no declined notifications, just absolute, unadulterated financial power. I closed my laptop, grabbed my purse, and walked out of my executive office. I had a first-class, non-refundable ticket to paradise waiting for me in the morning, and my family had an explosive, devastating reality check waiting for them right behind it. The morning of December 21st broke over Atlanta with a crisp and bitter chill. In years past, the 48 hours leading up to Christmas Eve had always been a grueling marathon of physical and emotional exhaustion for me. I would normally be waking up at 4 in the morning with aching feet and burned fingers, frantically loading heavily insulated food carriers into the back of transport vans. I would be fielding a dozen panicked phone calls from my mother about table settings and linen colors, sacrificing my own peace of mind to ensure their holiday illusion was perfectly seamless. But on this particular morning, I woke up naturally as the soft winter sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown penthouse. I stretched against the high thread count sheets and listened to the absolute beautiful silence of my home. There was no panic, there was no rushing. There was only the sweet and steady rhythm of my own breathing. I walked into my kitchen, poured myself a cup of rich dark roast coffee, and leaned against the granite countertop. My phone resting on the kitchen island began to vibrate with an incoming stream of text messages. I did not feel the usual spike of anxiety that traditionally accompanied communications from my family. I simply took a slow sip of my coffee, picked up the device, and opened the family group chat. They were completely oblivious to the massive financial crater that had opened up beneath their feet the night before. Caught up in their own staggering arrogance, they firmly believed they were just one day away from hosting the high society event of the decade. The first message was a massive block of text from Chloe. "Jasmine," she wrote, "I need you to make a quick run to the store before you head over to the Buckhead house tomorrow. I need you to pick up bleach glass cleaner and a fresh pack of scrub brushes for the basement bathroom." Liam's mother is incredibly particular about cleanliness. If the upstairs powder rooms get too crowded, she might wander downstairs to use the basement facilities. "I need you to make sure that bathroom shines like a mirror before the guests arrive. Also, do not forget what I said about using the service entrance by the garage. We are having a custom floral arch installed around the main doors, and we absolutely cannot have you tracking kitchen grease or carrying dirty cleaning supplies through the grand foyer." I read the message twice, marveling at the sheer, unadulterated audacity of her words. She was not just asking her sister to provide free premium catering and free childcare. She was actively ordering a self-made millionaire to scrub toilets on her hands and knees, just in case her wealthy white mother-in-law decided to take a stroll down to the basement. She wanted me to enter through the servant quarters so I would not visually contaminate her grand floral entrance. A few seconds later, another message popped up on the screen. This one was from my father Calvin. "Jasmine," he typed, his tone as commanding and dismissive as ever. "When you arrive tomorrow, make sure you park your car at the Community Recreation Center down the block and walk up the hill to the estate. We need the entire circular driveway kept completely clear so the valet service can properly park Liam's parents' town car. Do not leave your vehicle parked on the street where anyone can see it. It will clutter the aesthetic of the neighborhood, and we do not want to give off the wrong impression." I let out a soft, genuine laugh that echoed in my quiet kitchen. My father was actively ordering me to hide my vehicle out of pure shame. He had absolutely no idea that I currently drove a custom-imported luxury SUV that retailed for more than his entire retirement portfolio. He simply assumed that because I worked in the culinary industry, I must be driving some battered, leaking eyesore that would ruin the pristine image of the neighborhood. They were so deeply trapped in their own manufactured narrative of superiority that they had completely lost touch with reality. I did not argue with either of them. I did not type out a furious paragraph defending my dignity or my vehicle. I did not remind Chloe that I managed a fleet of 20 commercial catering trucks and had a staff that handled my sanitation needs. Engaging with their delusion would only give them the opportunity to play the victims. Instead, I gave them exactly what they wanted to hear. I typed a quick, cheerful response into the group chat. "No problem at all," I wrote. "I will grab the scrub brushes today, and I will make sure my car is parked completely out of sight. I will see you both tomorrow." I hit send and tossed the phone onto the kitchen counter. I had fed their illusion perfectly. They were now absolutely certain that their obedient invisible servant was completely under their control. I walked out of the kitchen and headed straight into my expansive walk-in closet. It was time to pack. I pulled down my vintage designer trunk, running my hands over the smooth, incredibly expensive leather. I opened the brass clasps and laid it flat on the center island of the closet. I thought about the plain, shapeless black apron Chloe had demanded I wear to blend in with the hired help. I smiled as I began pulling items from my pristine cedar hangers. I packed a stunning emerald green silk maxi dress that moved like liquid when I walked. I folded a vibrant tangerine resort set that I had purchased from an exclusive boutique in Milan. I packed wide-brimmed woven sun hats, oversized designer sunglasses, and 3 different pairs of strappy leather sandals. I gathered my highest quality skincare products, tucking expensive coconut sunscreen and shimmering body oils into a waterproof leather cosmetic bag. Every single item I placed into that trunk was a celebration of the vibrant, successful, and joyful woman I had worked so incredibly hard to become. There was not a single trace of dark drab servant clothing in sight. I was packing for paradise, leaving their basement demands thousands of miles behind me. The physical act of packing felt like a spiritual cleansing. With every zipper I closed and every buckle I fastened, I was actively shedding the heavy, suffocating role of the family mule. I was no longer the scapegoat who could be summoned to fix their mistakes or fund their fantasies. I was a woman reclaiming her absolute power. I zipped the heavy leather trunk shut and stood it upright by the bedroom door. The rest of the day passed in a beautiful, uninterrupted state of tranquility. I did not check my phone again. I did not look at the frantic emails from my mother regarding the imaginary imported caviar. I spent the afternoon at a high-end spa downtown, enjoying a long, luxurious massage that melted away the last lingering remnants of tension from my shoulders. I ate a quiet, perfect dinner at my favorite corner bistro, savoring a glass of bold red wine while watching the city lights begin to twinkle against the early winter sunset. When evening fell, I returned to my apartment and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the sprawling, glowing grid of Atlanta. Somewhere out there in the suburbs, my family was likely running around in a state of absolute frenzy, packing their own bags and preparing for their grand debut at the Buckhead Mansion. They were probably dreaming about the moment Liam's parents would walk through those solid oak doors. They had absolutely no idea that an invisible digital clock was loudly ticking down to their total destruction. The luxury property management system was currently sitting in its final grace period. In just a matter of hours, when the clock struck 9 in the morning, on December 22nd, the system would permanently revoke their lease, lock the gates, and shut them out in the cold. I slept perfectly that night. It was the deep restorative sleep of a woman whose conscience was entirely clear and whose boundaries were finally made of iron. I woke up naturally just before dawn on the morning of December 22nd. The sky outside my windows was a soft, bruised purple, promising a bitterly cold day for the city of Atlanta. I took a hot shower dressed in a comfortable cashmere travel set and pulled my hair back into a sleek, polished style. I walked through my spotless, quiet apartment one last time, making sure all the lights were off and the blinds were drawn. I paused by the entryway table and opened my designer purse. I ran my thumb over the stiff, familiar cover of my dark blue passport, double-checking that it was securely tucked inside the zippered pocket alongside my boarding pass. Everything was perfectly in place. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from the concierge desk downstairs. The private black car service I had booked the previous night was currently idling at the curb, ready to transport me directly to the international terminal. I grabbed the handle of my leather trunk and pulled open my front door. I stepped out into the quiet, carpeted hallway and pulled the heavy door shut behind me, listening to the solid, satisfying click of the deadbolt locking into place. I walked toward the elevators, heading straight for the airport, while the ticking time bomb on the rental property finally reached its explosive final hour. The ride to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was a masterclass in tranquility. Sitting in the back of the plush town car watching the morning traffic thicken across the Atlanta highways, I felt an extraordinary lightness in my chest. The usual holiday anxiety that had plagued me for over a decade was completely gone. I was not mentally reviewing inventory lists, panicking over delivery schedules, or worrying if my mother would find a microscopic flaw in the linen napkin folds. I was simply a successful woman on her way to the Caribbean. I moved through the private premium security screening with effortless speed and made my way up to the exclusive first-class departure lounge. The space was an absolute oasis of calm, hovering above the frantic, rushing holiday crowds below. Soft jazz played over the hidden speakers, and the air smelled faintly of expensive espresso and fresh lilies. I found a secluded, high-backed leather chair near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. An attendant in a crisp uniform immediately approached offering a warm towel and a beverage menu. I ordered a glass of vintage champagne and a plate of fresh berries settling deep into the luxurious cushions. I glanced at the gold watch resting on my wrist. It was 8:45 in the morning, 15 minutes until the property management system officially locked my family out of their fake suburban royalty. The champagne arrived in a delicate crystal flute. I took a slow sip, letting the crisp, dry flavor ground me in the present moment. I did not feel a single ounce of lingering guilt. The heavy, suffocating mantle of the dutiful, unappreciated eldest daughter had been shed, completely left behind in the freezing city streets. I placed the flute on the glass table and watched the digital clock on my phone screen. 8:55, 8:58, 9 o'clock. The minute changed, and I knew exactly what was happening 20 miles away in the affluent hills of Buckhead. The automated system had just severed the digital keys. The massive iron gates of the estate were now officially disabled. The grand oak doors were electronically bolted shut. My parents, who had likely just pulled up to the property, loaded down with Chloe's cheap basement cleaning supplies, were currently standing on the wrong side of the threshold. I took another leisurely sip of champagne. I watched a massive jet push back from its gate, the engines roaring silently behind the thick acoustic glass of the lounge. At exactly 9:14, my phone erupted. It vibrated violently against the glass table, spinning in tight circles as the caller identification flashed brightly on the screen. It was my mother, Beatrice. I let it ring. I watched the screen go dark as the call went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, the phone erupted again. Then a third time. They were panic dialing. I picked up the device on the fourth ring, swiped to answer, and brought it to my ear. I did not say hello. I just listened. The wind was howling through the phone microphone, carrying the sound of freezing gusts, whipping across the elevated hills of Buckhead. "Jasmine, where in the world are you?" Beatrice shrieked, her voice shrill and echoing with absolute unadulterated panic. "We are standing outside the gates of the Buckhead house and the access codes are not working. The rental agents are refusing to let us inside. They are demanding a $10,000 deposit on the spot, and they are claiming our cards are declining. There must be some kind of glitch with the system. And the catering trucks are not here. You said the catering was handled. Where is the food? Where are you?" Her breathing was ragged. I could hear the sharp, frantic clicking of Chloe's heels on the pavement in the background, accompanied by the distinct muffled whining of a toddler who had been confined to a car seat for too long. They were stranded in the cold driveway of a house they did not own, completely exposed to the harsh reality of their financial ruin. I leaned back into the soft leather of my chair. I looked out at the sun gleaming off the silver wings of the airplanes. I opened my mouth and a sound escaped my throat that I had not made in years. It was a laugh. Not a bitter, cynical scoff, but a genuine, bright, deeply relaxed laugh that bubbled up from my chest and filled the quiet corner of the airport lounge. "What is so funny?" Beatrice snapped, the panic in her voice sharply pivoting into defensive anger. "This is an absolute disaster. Liam's parents are landing in 3 hours. They are expecting a luxury estate and a premium cocktail hour. I need you to call your bank right now and authorize the $10,000 charge so they will open these gates. Then I need you to get your trucks up this driveway immediately. This is not a joke, Jasmine." "I am not laughing at a joke, Mom," I said, my voice smooth, calm, and utterly untethered from her manufactured crisis. "I am laughing because I find the acoustics in the first-class International Departure Lounge to be incredibly delightful." The line went dead silent. The background noise of Chloe's pacing seemed to freeze. I could practically hear my mother's brain short-circuiting as she tried to process the words I had just spoken. "The International Lounge." Beatrice repeated, her voice dropping to a confused, breathless whisper. "What are you talking about? Why are you at the airport? You are supposed to be driving to Buckhead. You are supposed to be setting up the caviar and prepping the basement." I took a deep, satisfying breath. No, Mom, I replied pleasantly. I am not supposed to be doing any of that. I am actually waiting for my boarding group to be called. I am flying to a five-star resort in St. Lucia for the holidays. I have decided that I prefer the Caribbean sun over a dark, cold suburban basement. Jasmine, you cannot do this! Beatrice gasped, the sheer terror returning to her voice in a tidal wave. You promised me you would handle the catering. You promised you would keep the kids quiet downstairs. You cannot just abandon your family right before Christmas. We do not have the money to pay this deposit. We do not have any food. What are we supposed to feed Liam's parents? You could feed them the cheap frozen appetizers you usually buy when you are not stealing my professional services, I suggested mildly. Or better yet, you could offer them the plastic dollar store building blocks you demanded I use to entertain the toddlers. I hear those pair wonderfully with a vintage Chardonnay. But honestly, Mom, the menu is not my concern anymore. You see, I was fully prepared to cater your entire gala for free. I was standing in your hallway 2 weeks ago with a $15,000 contract in my hands, ready to gift you the most spectacular holiday dinner of your life. I paused, letting the dollar amount hang heavily in the air between us. I was standing right there in the foyer when you and Chloe finalized your brilliant little plan. I continued, dropping the polite facade and letting the cold, hard steel of my reality slice through her delusion. I heard every single word. I heard Chloe complain about my kitchen hobby. I heard you suggest locking me in the basement with dirty diapers so I would not embarrass you in front of the old money venture capitalists. I heard the mandate to wear a plain black apron so no one would confuse me for a real guest. A sharp, strangled gasp came from the other end of the line. Beatrice was completely speechless. The undeniable proof of her betrayal had just stripped away every single layer of her entitlement. You wanted me to be invisible, I stated, my voice echoing with absolute authority. You wanted me to be the silent, obedient help, while you took credit for my money and my hard work. So I gave you exactly what you asked for. I made myself invisible. I withdrew my financial guarantee on the house. I reassigned my entire catering fleet to a client who actually respects me. I stepped entirely out of your way so you and Chloe can enjoy the holiday exactly as you deserve. Jasmine, please. Beatrice started to sob, a pathetic, desperate sound that held absolutely zero remorse. You misunderstood. We did not mean it like that. You have to fix this. Before she could spin another lie, the phone fumbled. I heard Chloe wailing in the background, a high-pitched shriek of absolute terror as she realized her perfect socialite facade was crashing down around her ears. Mom, do something! Chloe wailed, her voice carrying through the receiver. Liam's parents are going to be at our house in 3 hours, and we do not even have a single bottle of water to offer them. There was a loud scuffle, the sound of a device being snatched from someone's hand, and then my father's booming, furious voice filled the speaker. Listen to me right now, young lady, Calvin roared, attempting to use the heavy, commanding tone that used to terrify me when I was a child. You are going to hang up this phone, walk out of that airport, and get down here to fix this mess immediately. You are intentionally ruining your sister's image. You are humiliating this family. You have a duty to support us. I am your father, and I am ordering you to authorize this payment and bring the food. The sheer audacity of his demand did not trigger my anxiety. It just highlighted exactly how weak he truly was. A man who could not afford to host a party was screaming at his daughter for refusing to buy his pride. You do not get to order me to do anything. Calvin, I replied, my voice dangerously soft and completely unyielding. You lost the right to demand my respect the moment you decided I was nothing more than a blue-collar embarrassment to be hidden away from your white son-in-law. You want to pretend you are wealthy. You want to act like Atlanta royalty. Then go ahead and pay the $10,000 deposit yourself. Pull out that premium credit card you love to flash around and hand it to the rental agent. I know you canceled the guarantee! Calvin yelled, his voice cracking with panicked rage. The property manager told us the primary account was withdrawn. You set us up. I just stopped bankrolling your lies, I corrected him smoothly. You built this illusion entirely on your own. Now you get to figure out how to explain to Liam's parents why they are standing in a driveway with no food, no staff, and no house. Jasmine, you get back here right now! Calvin screamed, the background noise escalating as Chloe continued to melt down on the sidewalk. If you get on that plane, you are dead to this family. Over the lounge speakers, a crisp, professional voice announced the final boarding call for my flight to St. Lucia. I picked up my crystal flute, finished the last sip of my vintage champagne, and stood up from the leather chair. "Do not wait up for me," I said coolly into the receiver, completely ignoring his empty threat. "And definitely do not wait up for the premium catering. Merry Christmas." I pulled the phone away from my ear, cutting off Calvin's furious shouting. With a single swipe of my thumb, I switched the device directly into airplane mode. The connection severed instantly. The digital umbilical cord that had tied me to their toxic demands for over a decade was officially cut. I slid the phone into my designer purse, picked up my leather carry-on, and walked gracefully toward the boarding gate, leaving them entirely alone in the freezing cold reality they had created for themselves. All that remained for them now was the spectacular, devastating collapse of their own making. That was a show they would have to watch without me. I had a flight to catch. The flight to St. Lucia was the most peaceful 4 hours of my entire adult life. I drank sparkling water, read a novel, and watched the frozen gray landscape of the American South slowly fade into the brilliant, glittering turquoise waters of the Caribbean. When the plane finally touched down and the cabin doors opened, the warm tropical air washed over my face like a total absolution. I stepped onto the tarmac, a completely free woman. I waited until I had cleared customs and was comfortably seated in the back of a private luxury transport headed toward my five-star resort before I finally turned my phone off airplane mode. Instantly, the device nearly vibrated out of my hand. The digital panic was absolutely staggering. 24 missed calls, 42 text messages, 11 voicemails. I did not text them back. I did not answer the incoming call that immediately popped up from my father. Instead, I connected my wireless headphones, leaned back against the plush leather seats of the town car, and pressed play on the first voicemail. As my private driver navigated the winding, lush roads toward the volcanic mountains of St. Lucia, the juxtaposition of our situations was almost intoxicating. I did not need to be physically present in Atlanta to watch my family's grand illusion shatter into a million pieces. They narrated their own spectacular downfall for me, leaving a minute-by-minute audio documentary of their absolute devastating ruin. The first voicemail was from my father, Calvin. The background noise revealed the howling winter wind and the heavy sound of car doors slamming shut. He was furious, yelling into the receiver that the property manager had threatened to call the local police for trespassing. They had been forced to turn their vehicles around and drive in a humiliating, defeated procession back to their own house in the Alpharetta suburbs. This was a house they had deliberately neglected to clean or decorate because they had banked their entire social reputation on using my hidden money to secure the Buckhead mansion. My father, who had spent the entire morning screaming at me through the phone and demanding I submit to his authority, was now reduced to scrambling around a normal living room, hiding stray toys under the sofa cushions. They were retreating to a home that had absolutely no festive ambiance, no grand floral archways, and no sweeping dual staircases to impress their wealthy in-laws. The next voicemail was from my mother, Beatrice. The pristine, sophisticated tone she always used when pretending to be an old-money socialite was completely obliterated. She was hyperventilating. I could hear the echo of their everyday suburban kitchen in the background. She was crying hysterically about the dust on the baseboards and the lack of a proper cocktail bar. They were about to host Liam's incredibly snobbish parents in a house that smelled like stale air and desperate anxiety. There were no crystal chandeliers. There was just a standard living room, with a slightly stained rug that they had desperately tried to hide under an armchair. Beatrice was sobbing that the guest bathroom did not even have fresh hand towels. These were people who expected valet parking, string quartets, and immediate champagne service upon arrival, and my mother was currently realizing she could not provide a single ounce of that curated holiday experience. Then came the audio from Chloe. Her voicemail was pure, unadulterated chaos. Without me securely locked in the basement to act as an unpaid invisible nanny, Chloe was suddenly forced to actually parent her own children. The background audio was a deafening cacophony of shrieking toddlers. Her boys, having been strapped into car seats for hours during the futile trip to Buckhead and back, were experiencing a monumental, catastrophic meltdown. Chloe was weeping into the phone, screaming that one of the kids had just wiped sticky juice-covered hands all over her custom-tailored silk trousers. She was sobbing that she did not even have time to reapply her makeup or change out of her ruined clothes. She was wailing that Liam was absolutely furious. He was pacing the hallway, demanding to know why they were suddenly hosting his elite family in a cramped, noisy house instead of the luxury estate she had promised him for months. Chloe, who had built her entire identity on being the perfect, effortless wife, was completely cracking under the pressure of having to do 5 minutes of actual unglamorous parenting. The golden child was finally facing the reality of her own life without my invisible labor to prop her up. But the absolute crown jewel of the voicemail collection was the fourth message from Beatrice. I could clearly hear the frantic slamming of cabinet doors and the harsh, repetitive beeping of a standard kitchen microwave. She was in a state of absolute culinary terror. She had no Wagyu beef sliders. She had no lobster blinis. She had absolutely no imported Royal Beluga caviar. Because they had fully expected my professional catering fleet to magically appear and provide a Michelin-quality feast for free, my mother had purchased absolutely zero groceries for a backup plan. She was wailing into the phone that she was currently tearing through the deep freezer in the garage, desperately trying to thaw out boxes of cheap mass-produced mozzarella sticks and frozen miniature quiches left over from a neighborhood block party 2 years ago. The image was so vivid it was almost cinematic. The woman who had demanded I wear a plain black apron so I would not visually contaminate her elegant guests was now frantically attempting to arrange soggy microwaved pizza rolls onto a serving platter. She was crying about how the cheese was burning on the edges while the centers remained completely frozen. She was begging me to tell her where my delivery trucks were, completely unable to accept that the premium menu she had bragged about was currently being served to a room full of high-paying celebrity guests across town. The audio painted a flawless portrait of their total collapse. The facade of wealth, grace, and effortless superiority was completely dead. The illusion they had built to trap Liam and impress his family had evaporated the moment my financial backing disappeared. They were nothing more than entitled opportunists, standing in a messy kitchen surrounded by screaming kids and cheap frozen food. As Beatrice was rambling into the voicemail, crying over the soggy appetizers and pleading for me to save them, a sharp, piercing sound cut through the background of the recording. It was the chime of their suburban front doorbell. The recording captured a collective, panicked gasp from my family. The heavy silence that followed was thick with impending doom. I could hear Chloe let out a terrified whimper. Liam's wealthy, highly critical parents, expecting the holiday event of the season at an exclusive glittering mansion, were currently standing on the front porch. The door was opening. The elite in-laws were stepping into a poorly lit, noisy suburban living room filled with screaming toddlers, frantic adults, and the unmistakable lingering scent of burnt frozen cheese. The absolute disaster of a party they were promised would be the event of the season had officially begun. The morning of Christmas Eve in St. Lucia was a masterpiece of tropical perfection. I woke up to the sound of gentle waves lapping against the shore, and the warm golden Caribbean sun streaming through the sheer white curtains of my oceanfront villa. For the first time in my entire professional career, I was not spending December 24th frantically barking orders in a commercial kitchen, checking inventory manifests, or appeasing highly strung clients. I was lying in a plush king-sized bed, wrapped in high-thread count linen, without a single deadline looming over my head. I ordered room service, requesting a lavish breakfast of fresh papaya mango and a pot of rich dark roast coffee. I carried my breakfast tray out to the private balcony, letting the salty sea breeze wash over my skin. I had deliberately kept my phone on Do Not Disturb for all personal contacts. I had absolutely no desire to hear any more frantic voicemails from my father or hysterical sobbing from my mother. They had made their bed, or rather they had lost their luxury rental estate, and now they had to lie in whatever cramped suburban reality they had scrambled together. I assumed they would spend the next few days licking their wounds and trying to figure out how to explain the disaster to Liam and his wealthy old money parents. I underestimated my sister. I forgot that a narcissist stripped of their audience will always find a way to build a new stage. I was lounging on a pristine white sunbed beside my private plunge pool, the turquoise ocean stretching out infinitely before me. I had just finished my coffee when a sharp, distinct chime cut through the tranquil morning air. It was not a text message or a personal call. It was a priority business notification. My phone was programmed to bypass the Do Not Disturb settings for any direct alerts regarding Jasmine Culinary Group. As the CEO and executive chef, I needed to know if my company was mentioned in the press or flagged online. I picked up my phone and unlocked the screen, expecting to see a glowing review from the Jonathan Hayes Charity Gala Prep or an inquiry from a high-profile event planner. Instead, a Google alert for my business name hovered on the screen, linked directly to a rapidly trending video on a major social media platform. The video was posted by Chloe. I tapped the link, my eyebrows raising in mild curiosity. The application opened and my sister's face filled the high-definition screen. I had to hand it to her. Her performance was visually flawless. Chloe was sitting in the cramped, poorly lit living room of our parents' suburban house. She had clearly spent significant time staging the shot to maximize the aesthetic of tragedy. She was wearing a perfectly oversized beige cashmere sweater that made her look small and fragile. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun that took at least 20 minutes to achieve, and her makeup was expertly smudged under her eyes to create the illusion that she had been weeping for hours. To complete the tragic tableau, she was holding her youngest toddler on her hip. The child looked completely confused, clutching a plastic toy, serving as the ultimate prop for her unhinged narrative. I pressed play, leaning back against the sun lounger. "Hey everyone," Chloe began, her voice quivering with expertly manufactured heartbreak. She sniffled, wiping an imaginary tear from her cheek. "I normally do not post personal family matters online, but I am just so completely devastated and heartbroken that I had to share this. As many of you know, Liam and I were supposed to host a beautiful pre-Christmas dinner 2 days ago for his parents, who flew into Atlanta from Boston. But my older sister Jasmine maliciously and intentionally ruined our family Christmas. I took a slow, deep breath, marveling at her sheer audacity. She was actually doubling down. She was not just playing the victim, she was launching a public smear campaign. Jasmine owns a catering company here in Atlanta called Jasmine Culinary Group. Chloe continued, explicitly naming my business to her thousands of followers. She promised months ago that she was going to handle all the food for our holiday dinner. We trusted her. We relied on her. But because she has always been incredibly jealous of my marriage to Liam and resentful of the life we have built, she decided to punish us in the most cruel way possible. Last night, without any warning, she completely abandoned us. She canceled the food, refused to answer our calls, and left my innocent babies with absolutely nothing to eat. She left us starving on Christmas Eve just to satisfy her own bitter jealousy. I watched as Beatrice walked into the frame behind Chloe, placing a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder and looking into the camera with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. "We are just in shock," Beatrice added, playing her supporting role with theatrical grace. "We raised Jasmine to value family above all else. To see her intentionally sabotage her sister's holiday out of pure spite is something a mother can barely comprehend. We are currently trying to scrape together whatever we can find in the pantry to feed Liam's parents. Please pray for our family during this incredibly difficult time." The video ended with Chloe burying her face in her toddler's neck, her shoulders shaking with fake sobs. Below the video, in the caption box, Chloe had directly tagged my business page, adding the hashtags family betrayal and do not hire. I scrolled down to look at the comment section. The video had been live for less than an hour, but it was already gaining massive rapid traction across their entire Atlanta social circle. The country club elites, the suburban housewives, and Liam's wealthy friends were swarming the comment section, validating her lies and feeding her exactly the kind of sympathetic attention she craved. The comments were a masterclass in blind, unverified outrage. "I cannot believe your own sister would do something so evil. Sending prayers to you and Liam," wrote one woman who frequently played tennis with my mother. "This is absolutely disgusting behavior. Thank you for sharing the name of her company." I was actually considering booking Jasmine Culinary Group for my spring gala, but I will absolutely be taking my business elsewhere. A chef who abandons her own family is completely unprofessional, wrote another woman, a prominent event planner in Buckhead. Liam's friends were chiming in as well, their comments dripping with arrogant white savior complexes. Chloe, Liam is a great guy. You both deserve so much better than this toxic behavior. Let us know if you need us to send over some takeout from the club. Do not let her ruin your holiday. Chloe was actively responding to the comments, playing the gracious wounded survivor. She was thanking them for their prayers, lamenting how hard it was to be the target of such deep-seated familial jealousy, and explicitly encouraging people to leave negative reviews on my company's business pages to warn other innocent clients about my supposed unreliability. She was trying to burn my culinary empire to the ground to cover up her own humiliating failure. She honestly believed that because I had always stayed quiet in the past, because I had always swallowed their disrespect to keep the peace, I would simply absorb this public attack and let her control the narrative. She thought my silence meant I was weak. She thought the distance I had put between us meant I was too cowardly to fight back. I locked my phone and set it down on the glass table next to my lounge chair. I looked out at the crystal clear water of the Caribbean Sea. The bright tropical sun beat down on my shoulders, warming my skin. I did not feel a single drop of panic. I did not feel the urge to call my lawyer or frantically type out a defensive emotional comment begging people to believe my side of the story. I felt a cold, absolute, and terrifyingly calm sense of resolution. They wanted to play this game in public. They wanted to drag my professional reputation into the town's square and invite their entire social network to throw stones at me. They wanted to use my name to generate sympathy from their wealthy friends. They had completely forgotten the cardinal rule of starting a fire. You should never strike a match when you are standing in a house made entirely of dry paper. I reached back into my beach bag and pulled out my laptop. I opened the sleek silver device and connected to the high-speed resort network. I bypassed the social media platforms and went directly to the secure cloud storage drive connected to my home security system back in Atlanta. 2 weeks ago, when I was standing in their grand foyer, holding the $15,000 contract, I had not just been listening. My phone, tucked into the pocket of my blazer, was connected to my smart home application. When I realized what they were discussing in the living room, I had quietly pressed a button that activated the voice memo recording feature. The acoustics in their marble hallway were flawless. The microphone had picked up every single crystal-clear syllable of their arrogant, entitled scheming. I downloaded the audio file to my desktop. I then opened my corporate accounting software. I navigated to the billing records for the current month and generated a high-definition PDF copy of the massive $20,000 catering invoice I had originally drafted for the Addams Family Christmas Gala. The invoice explicitly detailed the imported Royal Beluga caviar, the Wagyu beef, the elite staffing costs, and the fleet logistics. Stamped across the center of the document, in bold red digital ink, was the word "canceled," accompanied by a $0 balance, indicating that it was originally structured as a fully comped gift. I saved both files to my desktop. I closed the accounting software and opened my social media management platform. Chloe had asked for an audience. She had begged her friends, her country club associates, and Liam's old money family to look closely at our dynamic. She had explicitly invited the public to judge my character. It was time to give the audience exactly what they asked for. It was time to pull back the curtain, drop the receipts, and end this war permanently. The flight to the Caribbean was an absolute masterclass in serenity. As my plane ascended through the thick winter clouds, leaving the freezing air of Atlanta far behind, I closed my eyes and allowed my mind to drift back to the city I had just escaped. While I was soaring thousands of feet in the air, surrounded by plush blankets and attentive flight attendants, my family was rapidly descending into their own personal layer of suburban hell. I did not need to be physically present in the state of Georgia to know exactly how their catastrophic morning was unfolding. The frantic voicemails I had received in the airport lounge had already painted a crystal-clear cinematic picture of their absolute ruin. The grand illusion they had spent months building was officially dead, and they were currently choking on the bitter ashes of their own arrogance. I could perfectly envision the humiliating retreat from the affluent hills of Buckhead. Calvin was undoubtedly white-knuckling the steering wheel of his least luxury sedan as he drove away from the locked iron gates of the massive estate. The $10,000 security deposit had proven to be an insurmountable fortress. They were forced to turn their vehicles around in a pathetic defeated procession and head back toward their own neighborhood in Alpharetta. The silence inside their cars must have been absolutely deafening. Chloe was likely staring out the passenger window in sheer terror, knowing that her carefully constructed identity as a wealthy society wife was completely unraveling right in front of her husband's eyes. Liam was undoubtedly fuming, demanding answers that none of them could afford to provide. When they finally pulled into the driveway of my parents' suburban home, the contrast must have been physically painful for them. They had spent weeks bragging to Liam and his elite family about sweeping dual staircases, crystal chandeliers, and a majestic holiday atmosphere. Instead, they were pulling up to a perfectly average house that had been completely neglected in their obsessive pursuit of the Buckhead mansion. There was no custom floral archway framing the front doors. There was no professional valet service waiting to park their expensive cars. There was just a cold concrete driveway and a house that had been completely abandoned in their rush to secure a fake life. The moment they stepped through the front door, the reality of their unpreparedness struck them like a physical blow. The house smelled of stale air and desperate anxiety, because they had fully intended to spend the entire holiday weekend at the rental property. Beatrice had done absolutely nothing to prepare her own home for guests. The baseboards were dusty. The mail was piled up on the entryway table. The formal living room was cramped and entirely devoid of any festive holiday ambiance. There was no roaring fire in a grand stone hearth. There was just a standard television set and a slight stain on the carpet that they had previously hidden under a decorative rug. The situation quickly escalated from a logistical failure into a full-blown domestic nightmare, without me securely locked in a basement to act as an unpaid invisible nanny. Chloe was suddenly forced to actually parent her own children. Her two toddlers, having been strapped into car seats for hours during the futile trip to Buckhead and back, were experiencing a monumental catastrophic meltdown. They were hungry, tired, and completely dysregulated. Chloe had no color-coded schedule and no dollar store toys to keep them entertained. I could easily imagine Chloe breaking down in the middle of the hallway. She had built her entire existence on being the flawless, effortless socialite who never broke a sweat. Now she was trapped in a noisy, unkempt house with screaming children pulling at her expensive tailored clothing. One of the toddlers invariably spilled a sticky fruit box across the entryway floor, leaving a bright red puddle on the hardwood. Chloe likely shrieked in horror as the juice splattered against her pristine designer shoes. She had absolutely no idea how to manage the chaos without my free labor to prop her up. The golden child was finally facing the unglamorous, messy reality of her own life, and she was completely cracking under the immense pressure. Liam was no longer the benevolent, wealthy savior making condescending jokes over brunch. The illusion of his in-laws' immense wealth had been completely shattered. He was pacing the living room, demanding to know why his incredibly snobbish old money parents were about to land in Atlanta, only to be brought to a dusty suburban house instead of a luxury mansion. Calvin was likely stammering through a pathetic web of lies, attempting to blame the property management company for a sudden administrative error. But Liam was a venture capitalist. He understood money, and he understood when someone did not have it. The humiliation radiating from Chloe and Calvin must have been absolutely palpable as Liam realized he had married into a family of broke, desperate opportunists. But the true heart of the disaster was unfolding in the kitchen. Beatrice was experiencing an absolute culinary terror. Because she had completely relied on my $15,000 premium catering contract to feed her guests, she had purchased absolutely zero groceries for a backup plan. There was no imported royal beluga caviar waiting to be served on toasted brioche. There were no Wagyu beef sliders or delicate winter vegetable tarts. The woman who had demanded I wear a plain black apron so I would not visually contaminate her elegant party was now standing in the middle of a barren kitchen with absolutely nothing to offer. Panic is a highly destructive force, especially for someone who relies entirely on appearances. Beatrice was frantically tearing through the kitchen cabinets searching for any scrap of sophisticated food. Finding nothing but half-empty boxes of cereal and stale crackers, she lunged for the deep freezer in the garage. She dug through layers of frost, pulling out boxes of cheap mass-produced frozen appetizers that had been sitting there since a neighborhood block party 2 years ago. The woman who had sneered at my blue-collar culinary business was now desperately ripping open cardboard boxes of generic mozzarella sticks and miniature spinach quiches. The kitchen quickly filled with the chaotic sounds of slamming cabinet doors and the harsh, repetitive beeping of the standard microwave. Beatrice loaded the frozen food onto cheap ceramic plates and shoved them into the appliance, praying for a miracle. But microwaving stale frozen food only yields disaster. The kitchen began to smell strongly of burnt breading and cheap synthetic cheese. The mozzarella sticks exploded in the microwave, leaving a greasy, hardened mess on the glass turntable. The miniature quiches were burned black on the edges while remaining completely frozen solid in the center. Beatrice was likely weeping over the kitchen island, staring at the pathetic, soggy appetizers. She had promised Liam's mother a Michelin-quality feast. She had bragged about a luxury cocktail hour. Now she was attempting to arrange burnt frozen cheese logs onto a dusty serving platter, hoping the dim lighting in the living room would mask the absolute tragedy of her culinary offerings. Her perfect suburban socialite aesthetic was completely dead. She was just a desperate woman standing in a foul-smelling kitchen, realizing that her arrogance had finally cost her everything. Calvin paced back and forth between the kitchen and the living room, his face flushed a deep shade of crimson. He was trying to figure out how to salvage his pride, but there was simply no money left to fix the problem. His premium credit cards were declined. His bank accounts were drained. He could not even order high-end takeout to replace the ruined frozen food because his financial resources were completely exhausted. The man who had screamed at me over the phone, demanding I submit to his authority, was now utterly powerless in his own home. The tension in the house was thick enough to suffocate them. Chloe was sobbing loudly in the corner, trying to wipe sticky juice off her designer pants, while her toddlers continued to scream. Liam was standing by the window, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his face dark with profound embarrassment and anger. Beatrice was scraping burnt cheese off a plate, tears streaming down her face, as the harsh smell of the microwave disaster drifted into the main living areas. They were trapped in a nightmare entirely of their own making. Every single lie they had told, every single illusion they had funded was collapsing on top of them simultaneously. The clock on the wall ticked forward, marking the relentless passage of time. They had no catering staff. They had no luxury venue. They had no sophisticated ambiance. They had absolutely nothing left to hide behind. The silence between the adults grew incredibly heavy, broken only by the continuous wailing of the children and the hum of the refrigerator. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing sound cut through the suffocating tension of the suburban house. It was the clear, unmistakable chime of the front doorbell. The sound hung in the air, freezing every single person in the room. Chloe let out a terrified whimper. Beatrice dropped a burnt quiche onto the floor. Liam closed his eyes in pure dread. His wealthy, highly critical parents, expecting the holiday event of the season at an exclusive glittering mansion, were currently standing on the front porch. The heavy wooden door was waiting to be opened. The elite in-laws were about to step into a poorly lit, noisy suburban living room filled with screaming toddlers, frantic adults, and the unmistakable lingering scent of burnt frozen cheese. The absolute disaster of a party they were promised would be the event of the season had officially begun. The warm Caribbean breeze swept across my private balcony, carrying the scent of salt and blooming hibiscus. But my attention was entirely captivated by the glowing screen in my hands. I sat back in the plush outdoor lounge chair and watched the digital detonation unfold with terrifying speed. Within 60 seconds of my post going live, the engagement metrics began to climb at a dizzying rate. Tagging Liam's family and the most prominent members of the Atlanta social scene had provided the initial spark, but the raw, undeniable proof I uploaded was the gasoline. People naturally gravitate toward a holiday scandal, but they absolutely devour a receipt-backed public takedown of a local hypocrite. The audio recording captured by my smart home application began playing on an endless loop across hundreds of screens throughout the city. The crisp, clear voices of my mother and sister callously plotting to lock me in a basement, like an unpaid invisible servant, echoed through the pristine living rooms of their country club peers. Then came the high-definition image of my $20,000 canceled catering invoice. That single document shattered any lingering doubts about my professional success and my financial standing. It explicitly detailed the imported royal beluga caviar, the premium wagyu beef, the elite staffing costs, and the massive scale of my culinary empire. I was not a struggling blue-collar cook desperately needing a shift manager position at a fast food chain. I was the financial backbone they had tried to break. I was the silent bankroll funding the very illusion they used to elevate themselves above me. I could perfectly envision the scene unfolding in that cramped, dimly lit suburban living room back in Georgia. Liam's parents represented the absolute pinnacle of white old money venture capital wealth. They operated in a world where discretion, loyalty, and treating staff with basic human decency were considered the bare minimum requirements for social acceptance. They had arrived at my parents' house expecting a luxury Buckhead mansion, a string quartet, and a Michelin-quality feast. Instead, they were met with the smell of burnt frozen cheese, the deafening screams of dysregulated toddlers, and the frantic, sweaty panic of my parents. But seeing my viral post was the fatal blow to my family's entire charade. Liam's mother, sitting uncomfortably on my parents' outdated floral sofa, surely opened her phone as the rapid-fire notifications rolled in. The realization must have hit her with staggering physical force. She was not sitting in the company of successful wealthy peers who shared her sophisticated social standing. She was sitting with entitled, desperate opportunists who actively exploited and emotionally abused their own flesh and blood simply to fund a fake lifestyle. In her world of old money exclusivity, treating hired help poorly was considered a massive character flaw, but treating your own highly successful daughter like a disposable basement slave was an unforgivable, grotesque sin. The absolute sheer vulgarity of my family's behavior was a direct offense to everything her family stood for. The disgust from Liam and his parents was undoubtedly swift and absolute. Liam, deeply mortified that he had married into a family of broke, manipulative grifters, would not stay to play happy families around a platter of microwaved spinach quiches. He had completely believed the carefully curated narrative Chloe sold him. He believed her family was sophisticated and graceful. Discovering that his wife was complicit in such a cruel, calculated scheme against her own sister shattered his perception of her instantly. I knew his type perfectly. He would immediately distance himself from the toxic fallout to protect his own pristine reputation and his family's valuable name. I could picture Liam standing up in the middle of that chaotic living room, his face tight with profound revulsion. He would silently gather his parents' luxury wool coats, refusing to even look at Chloe as she wept hysterically in the hallway. He would usher his wealthy parents out the front door, leaving my sister standing in her stained cashmere sweater amid the smoking ruins of her social climbing dreams. Chloe had built her entire identity, her entire sense of self-worth on being Liam's perfect society wife. Now her husband was driving away into the freezing night, deeply repulsed by the ugly truth she had tried so desperately to hide. The devastation did not stop at their front door. The Atlanta suburban social network is incredibly tight-knit and absolutely ruthless when it comes to public scandal. Beatrice and Calvin had spent years clawing their way to the top of the country club hierarchy, buying expensive drinks they could not afford, and boasting endlessly about their affluent connections. Now their carefully curated reputation was completely and utterly annihilated. The same women who had left sympathetic, validating comments on Chloe's fake, tearful video just an hour ago were now rapidly deleting their words. My mother's country club friends, women who thrived on exclusivity and gossip, immediately turned a blind eye to her. Beatrice would soon walk into the clubhouse and find empty tables. She would be quietly removed from charity planning committees and permanently excluded from holiday luncheons. Calvin would find his business associates suddenly unavailable for golf or networking dinners. They had become immediate social pariahs in the very circles they had sacrificed my mental health to impress. They had traded their relationship with their eldest daughter for a seat at a table that was now permanently revoking their invitation. As the reality of their complete social and marital destruction set in, my phone began to ring. The notifications cascaded down my screen in a relentless, panicked stream. They were no longer sending arrogant demands for basement cleaning supplies or expecting me to source imported luxury ingredients. They were sending desperate, unhinged pleas for mercy. My father texted first. His words were a frantic attempt to regain the control he had so completely lost. "Jasmine, please take the post down right now," he wrote. "Liam has left the house with his parents. Chloe is completely inconsolable and refusing to leave her room. You have made your point, but you are ruining your sister's marriage. This is going way too far. We can talk about this and fix it like a family. Please delete the audio before Liam's father forwards it to anyone else at his firm." Then came the barrage of messages from Chloe, completely stripped of her usual condescending smirk. "Jasmine, I am begging you," she typed, her panic bleeding through the screen. "Liam will not even answer my phone calls. His mother is totally humiliated that her friends in Boston are sending her the audio recording of our conversation. Please, I will do anything. I am so sorry about the basement comment. It was just a stupid joke. We never actually meant to lock you down there. Please tell everyone on your business page it was a misunderstanding. My entire life is falling apart and Liam says he is calling his lawyer in the morning." Finally, Beatrice called. When I refused to answer, she left a frantic, hyperventilating voicemail. "Jasmine, how could you do this to your own blood?" she wailed into the receiver, her voice cracking with genuine terror. "We are the absolute laughingstock of the entire neighborhood. My phone is blowing up with people from the club asking about your catering invoice and the Buckhead rental. You have to post a public retraction. You have to tell them we paid you for the food and that the audio was taken out of context. Please, Jasmine, they are going to revoke our country club membership over this scandal. You are destroying everything we worked so hard to build." I sat back on my private balcony, listening to the gentle, rhythmic crash of the ocean waves against the pristine shoreline. I read through their frantic messages. I listened to my mother's sobbing voicemail. I analyzed their words with the calm, detached precision of someone observing strangers through a glass wall. There was not a single genuine apology among them. They were not sorry for treating me like a disposable servant. They were not sorry for planning to hide me away so my presence would not ruin their wealthy aesthetic. They were not sorry for emotionally abusing me, dismissing my accomplishments, or exploiting my hard work. They were only sorry that they had been caught. They were only sorry that the wealthy white audience they cared so deeply about had finally seen them for who they truly were. They were grieving the loss of their social status, their country club access, and Liam's venture capital wealth, not the loss of their daughter. I looked at the long list of frantic messages illuminating my screen. For 35 years, these people had dictated my worth. They had demanded my money, my labor, and my absolute submission, while offering absolutely nothing in return. They had tried to keep me in the dark so they could shine. They wanted me to be the invisible foundation holding up their elaborate, fragile mansion of lies. I took a slow sip of my tropical drink, tasting the sweet local fruit and the sharp, warm rum. I smiled, feeling a profound, unshakable peace settle deep into my bones. The war was officially over, and I had won simply by refusing to play their game anymore. I did not need to negotiate with my abusers. I did not need to offer them a lifeline while they were drowning in a sea of their own consequences. With calm, deliberate precision, I tapped my screen and opened my father's contact profile. I scrolled to the bottom and firmly pressed block caller. Then I opened my mother's contact profile, ignoring a fresh text message pleading for a retraction, and blocked her number. Finally, I clicked on Chloe's name, silencing her desperate, frantic apologies about her crumbling marriage, and blocked her as well. I systematically severed the toxic emotional chains for good, choosing my own brilliant peace over their suffocating panic, leaving them to live in the devastating reality they had built entirely for themselves. There are moments in life when the deepest pain does not come from strangers, but from the very people we once trusted the most. Jasmine's story is not only about family betrayal, it is about discovering self-worth, setting boundaries, and finally understanding that kindness should never require sacrificing your dignity. For years, Jasmine tried to prove that she was worthy of love and respect. She worked tirelessly, built a successful career, and created a thriving catering company through her own determination and talent. She became an executive chef with a reputation for excellence, serving important clients and creating unforgettable experiences. Yet instead of celebrating her achievements, her own family continued to judge her based on outdated beliefs. They saw her profession as something beneath them, ignored her success, and treated her like someone they needed to hide. The first lesson from Jasmine's journey is this: never allow someone else's opinion to determine your value. There will always be people who fail to recognize your hard work. Some people will judge you by your career, your background, your choices, or their own expectations, instead of seeing who you truly are. But your worth is not measured by someone else's approval. Your worth comes from your character, your effort, your resilience, and everything you have overcome to become the person you are today. Jasmine spent years believing that if she worked harder, gave more, and sacrificed more, her family would finally appreciate her. But she discovered an important truth. You cannot force someone to value what they have already decided to ignore. The second lesson is kindness should always come with respect. Helping family and supporting the people you love can be one of the most beautiful things in life. But when your kindness becomes an expectation, when your generosity becomes something people feel entitled to, and when your sacrifices are constantly overlooked, the relationship becomes unhealthy. Jasmine was not wrong for wanting to help her family. Her mistake was believing that giving more would make people treat her better. She offered her talent, her money, and her time because she hoped they would finally see her value. Instead, they only saw what they could take from her. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not fight. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step away. Jasmine did not destroy her family's plans out of cruelty. She simply stopped providing the support that allowed them to maintain their false image. She removed herself from a situation where she was respected only for what she could provide, not for who she was. The third lesson is, true success does not require permission from anyone. Jasmine's family was obsessed with appearances. They cared about luxury homes, social status, and impressing wealthy people. They wanted others to believe they belonged to a world they were struggling to afford. But real success is not about pretending. Real success is about independence, confidence, and building a life you are proud of. The irony of Jasmine's story is that the person they looked down on was the person who had actually created something valuable. While they focused on appearances, Jasmine focused on building skills, creating opportunities, and becoming someone who could stand on her own. She did not need to prove her success by showing them her wealth. She did not need to list her achievements or force them to admit they were wrong. The moment she chose herself, she had already won. The fourth lesson is, do not be afraid to walk away from people who constantly make you feel small. Sometimes closing a door is not a punishment. Sometimes it is freedom. There are relationships that teach us love, and there are relationships that teach us boundaries. Learning the difference is one of the most important lessons in life. Jasmine finally understood that protecting her peace was not selfish. Choosing herself was not disrespectful. Walking away from people who only valued her when they needed something was an act of self-respect. If you have ever felt ignored, used, or unappreciated, remember this. You do not have to keep proving yourself to people who have already chosen not to see your worth. Keep growing, keep building, keep becoming the best version of yourself. And most importantly, surround yourself with people who celebrate your success instead of people who only appear when they need something from you. Your value does not decrease because someone refuses to recognize it. Call to action. If Jasmine's story touched your heart, we would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment when you realized you needed to set boundaries with someone you loved? Do you think Jasmine made the right decision by walking away and choosing herself? Share your opinion in the comments below. Your story and your perspective may inspire someone else who is going through a similar situation. If this story reminded you that self-respect, courage, and personal growth matter, please give this video a like. Every like helps us continue creating more powerful stories about resilience, family struggles, personal victories, and the strength it takes to stand up for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next emotional story. We will continue bringing you unforgettable journeys filled with lessons about love, betrayal, forgiveness, courage, and transformation. Your support means more than you know. Every comment, every like, and every subscription helps this community continue growing and allows us to share more meaningful stories with people around the world. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. Remember, you do not need to beg for a place at a table where people refuse to respect you. You do not need to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. And you never need to apologize for protecting your own happiness. Believe in yourself, honor your journey, and always choose a life where you are valued,